Well, welcome everyone to NAMI at noon. I'm Amy Brundle. I'm the Director of Marketing and Communications here at NAMI North Carolina. And as always, we're super pleased to have everybody here for today's webinar. First of all, of course, we'd like to thank the North Carolina Division of Mental Health, Developmental Disabilities, and Substance Use Services for their continuing support of this program. And we've got a couple of housekeeping items. If you'd like to have any questions submitted to our speaker today, we've got a Q&A section at the bottom. You can also access the chat, but either of those will be great places for you to place your question, and we will deal with those as we go along today. Also, we will be sending out any materials, a copy of the recording, and a feedback form for everybody to complete about today's session early next week. So we'll get it to you before the holiday. If you don't mind completing that, we love getting your feedback on our sessions. And now I'd like to introduce today's speaker, Dr. Tammie Moore. Dr. Moore is a licensed clinical psychologist and North Carolina board certified health services provider. She's the founder and CEO of Western Wake Counseling and Psychological Services in Cary. Dr. Moore moved to Cary 25 years ago from Chicago and has a bachelor's degree from LSU, a master's degree from Xavier University in New Orleans, and a doctorate in counseling psychology from Loyola Chicago. She completed her psychology internship at Duke, and she also served as a clinical faculty member in the school counseling graduate program at UNC Chapel Hill for over 10 years. So that is an extensive academic performance sheet there. She and her husband, Jeffrey, have been married 36 years. Together, they have 4 adult children and 4 grandchildren, which is going to make her an excellent expert in our topic today. Welcome, Dr. Moore. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you, Amy. Thank you for that introduction. And thank you and thank NAMI North Carolina for the invitation to join you today. I am very excited to be here. This is such a pertinent topic. So many people are experiencing what we're going to talk about today. I also think it's a great opportunity for those of you listening in to become more familiar with NAMI North Carolina. I'm very proud to be a board member, and the resources and the job that NAMI does is awesome. And so looking forward to just sharing information with you about maybe a phenomenon that you're experiencing as a caregiver, and maybe you didn't know there was a name for it. There's a name for it, and we're going to talk about it and not only give you information about it, but the main thing is to share ways to help you cope, to help you manage your own care while you're caring for others.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, excellent. So, if you registered for this session, you saw the title. We're talking about being a part of the sandwich generation. But for those who, maybe that's a new term or you're not entirely sure what it means, could you give us a bit of a rundown on what the sandwich generation actually means?
Yes, thank you. The name sandwich, first of all, it's lunchtime. Uh, so if you're having a sandwich or think about your favorite sandwich, whether it's peanut butter and jelly or ham and cheese, the contents in the middle is what we're talking about. Basically, we're looking at sandwich generation includes typically individuals between the ages, usually 40s to 70s. And the two ends, think about the bread, usually what it involves is you are supporting an aging parent
Mhm.
while also supporting either school-age children, college-age children, young adults, and trying to maintain your own well-being while doing all this caring. Many people in the sandwich generation are still working full-time. So balancing a full-time job while also, perhaps noticing signs of aging with your loved ones, your parents, your in-laws, maybe another relative that you're noticing is experiencing maybe some challenges. It might be physical. Maybe they had a knee surgery, or you're noticing some cognitive changes. while at the same time, either you have children in school under the age of 18, and there is a myth, being a parent, Amy, of 4 young adult children. I usually tell my clients, don't be fooled into thinking when they graduate from high school, your job is you're just changing the role that you play. You still have
Mhm.
a big role to play in your young adult lives. And so you may not be making breakfast for them, but you may be guiding them on career choices or talking to them about relationship challenges or how to navigate those spaces. And again, the sandwich, the ingredients in the middle, you are still trying to, I don't know, I want to say live your best life. You still want to do things, but this caregiving role seems to supersede a lot of the things that you have in, that you might want to go for a walk or go on a vacation, but you have to factor in the needs of these individuals who are leaning on you for support.
So you're kind of getting pulled in two directions.
Absolutely,
Mhm.
absolutely. You're feeling. Sometimes I tell folks to visualize the Gumby, where you've got the character, the stretching, the arms are just being pulled and in opposite direction, while you're trying to stay grounded in your individual role. And but it's just so important. And I'm glad that there's a name for it now. And because people feel um, a lot of distress sometimes, feeling overwhelmed, or they'll say, I don't have any time for myself. I can't take care of myself because they're being pulled in these different directions. So calling it the sandwich generation allows us to put, to understand that this is not imaginary, that this is really
Mhm.
something that's going on.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Do you think that a person's cultural, identity can play any part of this?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. That's a great, just acknowledgement. Typically in immigrant families, African American families, and I'm going to say Southern families. I hope my folks in the North don't take offense to this, but multi-generational responsibility is not uncommon. And especially now, when we look at what's going on societal, culturally, affordability, things like that, multi-generational families are having to lean in on each other. That the cost of things, so that culturally coming together, it made, it's not uncommon, but I think we're just seeing it more across the board, and people are acknowledging and experiencing it. And again, don't want folks to be gaslighted into thinking, is it just me? Is it just me? And sometimes it's validating to say to a client, like, hey, it's not just you. There is something going on environmentally that is happening.
Yeah. So we kind of understand that the sandwich generation is growing in number and responsibility.
Yes.
Why do you think that is, and why are we talking about it? Why is this such a relevant conversation right now?
Yes, absolutely. Number one, increased life expectancy. We're living longer, which is good, right? I mean, 10, 20 years longer than folks from generations ago. So with that living longer, we're seeing directly the impact of aging. In my practice, I talk a lot about aging well. I've been a Medicare provider since 2011, and I talk to clients about aging well. Aging well, just because you're getting older doesn't mean all of these problems are supposed to happen. But you have to be aware that as we age, things do decline. I
Mhm.
joke sometimes with clients about once you hit 50 and you go to your doctor's office, you're kind of thrown off the first time they say, "Have you had any falls lately?" And I remember, Amy, when they first asked me that question, I said, "Wait, nobody told me I was supposed to start falling. What do you mean?" And they sort of normalize that people, you might have falls, or you notice now you go into the kitchen and you walk in and you say, what did I come in here for? So
Mhm.
normal life expectancy, we're living longer. The other thing is, the data that we've done quite a bit of research, and the American Psychological Association, as early as I think it's 2008, came out with this really study, this pertinent study that looked at mothers between the ages of 35 and 55. And they actually categorized these women as the most stressed out, or having the most, they felt more stressed than any other age group. And you start to think, why is that? Well, they're actively parenting, and they have aging parents that now require some assistance, or aging loved ones who require some assistance. So that pull, so that's where the sandwich generation concept, it really came out of the psychology, out of the psychological literature. And even more recent, as a last study I looked at the other day in 2022 found that 24%, 2.5 million individuals are caring for these two generations.
Mm.
I think about it personally and professionally. Professionally, I am helping clients deal with this phenomenon. But personally, I can speak to it because I have a picture that I ran across, those Facebook memories that pop up. And it was a picture of me sitting at the table with my soon to be 89-year-old mother in law who has late stage Alzheimer's. Um, and my 4-year-old, now, no, she's 5. I got to correct myself. She is kindergarten. She's 5. Sitting, the three of us were sitting there. And as I looked at that picture, I just thought about the wisdom of the 89 years, even though she can't articulate, she taught school for 35 years. She had so much wisdom, so much knowledge, and I just love conversating with her. But now she might say 5 words a day with
Mm.
this late stage Alzheimer's.
Mhm.
And then juxtapose that to the 5-year-old who is the most curious, happy-go-lucky, wondrous girl that you could be sit there. So that was an experience. As I looked at that picture personally, I was like, wow, caregiving for this 89-year-old, and then the joy of this 5-year-old. And as the sandwich, or the meat in the sandwich, let's say, they both have needs. My mother-in-law has needs. She is currently under hospice with Duke, and they come in and they help and assist, but I have to manage that.
Mhm.
They do the physical hands-on work, but I'm the practice manager, as they say, scheduling. And then the 5-year-old, who is just so adorable, if her mom calls and says, can you pick her up for Girl Scouts? Then I'm on my way to pick her up for Girl Scouts. But
Mm.
sometimes, and then think about it, I have a full-time practice that I'm seeing clients all day. So it may be at 5:30 where I'm ending my day and I'm like, okay, is the caregiver here for my mother-in-law? All right, let me go now and pick up my granddaughter. So that is what it looks like on an everyday basis. For those of you listening in, it might be that you're a full-time worker and you have demands on your job, but your 75-year-old father has a doctor's appointment, and you no longer are comfortable with him driving himself to the doctor's office. Maybe you don't want him to get on the highway. So now you've got to go to your manager, your team lead, or somebody and say, hey, I need to take the afternoon off because I need to take dad to his doctor's appointment. So you get that done, but while you're driving dad to the doctor's appointment, you're having all these internal thoughts about, oh my God, how are they, that's why I'm not going to get this promotion at work. I can't seem to meet all the demands. These are the little things. And again, if you're in the throes of it, you may not even realize the stress that you're under, but having to navigate those two different demands. And what comes to mind, Amy, is if you've flown on an airplane and the flight attendant is giving her instructions, she says in the emergency instructions, those of you flying with small children or anyone who needs assistance, what are you supposed to do first?
Yeah, put your own mask on.
Thank you.
Hmm.
That is the answer. If you don't put your mask on and there's an emergency, you're going to perish trying to get the mask onto your granddaughter or your parent, and then you're going to perish. So the message I hope that everyone takes from this webinar today is that self-care is not selfish.
Hmm.
Self-care is not selfish. If you don't put your mask on or take time to care for yourself as a person in the sandwich generation, you're really not going to be able to care for anybody. So it's on the rise. 1 in 4 US adults are now part of the sandwich generation. Okay. 60% of the sandwich caregivers report psychological symptoms. And we'll talk more about that. But that's why another reason why we need to talk more about this.
Hmm. Yeah. And then, of course, COVID and financial stresses and all of that makes everything so much more complicated too.
Absolutely.
So,
Absolutely. Yes.
let's talk about the psychological and mental health implications
Mhm,
of kind
mhm.
of living this reality all the time, being the project manager
Yeah.
for, multiple people's projects.
Yes, yes, yes. And I'm so glad you brought up COVID and the pandemic, because I think we've moved on, right? Or it's
Hmm.
supposedly moved on. At least the world has moved on. But psychologically, I think we're still dealing with the implications of the pandemic. You know, we became even more aware of the fragility of our seniors. If you remember, during the pandemic, it was the children, they weren't in school because of the risk of germs and
Hmm.
getting COVID, and then our seniors. So I think that's another factor that really brought this to our attention, that our seniors and our young people were most at risk for getting the coronavirus. But let's talk about these emotional mental health implications of being in this generation. Number one is burnout. I call it caregiver burnout. Um, there's a saying about some often caregivers go first if they're
Hmm.
not careful, because they do forget about themselves. And we see it a lot with my aging clients. I have a lot of clients who are in their 70s and 80s and they're taking care of their spouse, been married 50, 60 years. I'll take care of my spouse. Inevitably, they forget about themselves and they may actually go or pass away before the spouse that they're caring for. So burnout is a factor. And things like decision fatigue. You're tired of making the decision. Should I go now? Should I wait till later? Should I talk to my manager now about needing to take mom for her appointment for chemotherapy? Should I wait till the day before? Should I tell them a week in advance? Things that you think are simple decisions, you get tired of making all of those decisions.
Hmm.
Chronic stress. So if you think about stress as just something that happens if you're on the highway and somebody cuts you off and you have a release of cortisol and you're all stressed, what we're experiencing now is more of a chronic, sort of ongoing, steady stress. Okay. I hate to call it this, or actually, it's called this in the literature. People call it heart attack stress
Mm.
because it's persistent. If you turn on the news, breaking news, someone said to me, you don't even get a weather report, it's extreme weather.
Right.
Everything is extreme. And basically the subliminal message is Be afraid, be afraid, be afraid, be on guard, be on guard. That raises your cortisol. Um, Mind, body, spirit, all connected. That's, I'm a cognitive behavioral psychologist, but I'm always talking about the mind, body, spirit connection. And a good example is, let's say Amy, you and I invited some of the folks on the webinar to come in to our office. And we said, we're not going to talk. We're just going to hook you up to a blood pressure machine and a heart monitor. We don't want you to say anything. You don't have to verbalize anything. We just want you to think about, taking your loved ones to the doctor, making sure that they've got everything they need, helping your young adult 24-year-old who graduated college and doesn't have a job and needs to move back home, thinking about that. Don't say a word, just think about it. Well, while you're hooked up to those machines and not talking, you and I, Amy, come back about 20 minutes later and all of the vitals are up. Their
Hmm.
blood pressure has increased, their heart rate has increased, their breathing has become more shallow. So chronic stress, if you complain of headaches, stomach aches, back pain, muscle pain, all of these symptoms can be a byproduct of the stress that you're under. Okay. I mentioned 60% of sandwich caregivers report symptoms of depression and anxiety. And let me just say a little bit about that, because a lot of people think that depression is just folks at home with the covers pulled over their head and the blinds closed. People with depression go to work every day.
Hmm.
They teach school, they practice law, they're physicians, firefighters, engineers. This pervasive feeling of either sadness, irritability, it's not always tears, it's not always sadness. Sometimes it's agitation, annoyance. Someone steps on your toe and you're ready to blow up something. Sometimes it can just be apathy. You don't care about anything. Maybe you used to enjoy going to the mall or getting together with friends for lunch. And now, take it or leave it. You
Hmm.
know, it's just that low grade. And lately, this just the past 3 days, I've had a day full of clients, and they've all talked a little bit about the seasonal affective. Well, I've had to tell them that they're like, I don't know what's going on. I'm feeling a little like this depression cloud is coming back. So then I have to talk about seasonal affective disorder. The days are shorter. We're not getting the sunlight that we normally get. Your circadian rhythm is off. That 1 hour time can really change up things. Um, so typically, depression, talk to your primary care doctors if you don't have a therapist. You don't need, therapists are great. We're out here to help you, but you can also go to your primary care doctor and say something's going on with my mood, anxiety, constantly worrying, overthinking, what's going to happen next, what's going to happen, and that panicky feeling. Some people feel like they're always overthinking, overanalyzing, on the verge of a panic attack. So, lastly, in terms of emotional, I want to talk about identity. If you're in that sandwich generation and you're 45 and you're like, what's going on? I'm still young. What happened? I thought I would have more time to just be free and enjoy myself. But now I've got all these caregiving roles that seem to be taken over, and I no longer have any time for me.
Hmm.
So those are just some of the examples. Hopefully, the folks in our audience, that some of this resonates with them and they understand, like, hey, yeah, I think I'm experiencing some of that.
Yeah. And so you've done some of this. But I want to keep exploring kind of what this looks like on an everyday um, basis,
Yeah.
just to give people kind of context of how the project management, the constant decisions, the constant demands can really start adding up and weighing somebody down.
Mm.
So can you share some additional practical examples of what this looks like?
Yes, absolutely. With, as we said earlier, we're living longer. So life expectancy is longer. So with aging, I want to talk a brief bit about dementia and Cognitive dementia is basically cognitive changes, cognitive problems. It
Mhm.
doesn't necessarily have to be Alzheimer's. Sometimes it can be Parkinson, it can be cardiovascular. Dementia is basically a problem with your cognitive abilities. You're having some issues. So when I have clients who say, something's going on with mom or dad, they're not acting normal. I usually, from a real life example, I talk about the three M's. Okay, the first M is medication. When you talk to your elder, your loved one, do they, if they're taking medications, do they know what the medications are for? Do they know when to take them? Do they have the little Sunday, Monday, Tuesday thing? Do you
Mhm.
find that they're missing the medication or they don't know what the medication is for? That is a sign of some cognitive challenges going on. So the first M is medication problems. The second M is money. Have you
Mhm.
noticed your older loved one having problems with managing their money? Maybe they're forgetting to pay a utility bill. Maybe they're overpaying. With my mother-in-law, she was so meticulous about paying her bills and keeping track of her good credit score. It wasn't until my husband discovered that she had like $1,000 credit with the utility company because she kept paying her bill. So money issues are another sign that something could be going on with your loved one. That's why they're targeted for scams. That's why these scammers out there reach out to older individuals
Mhm.
trying to get a hold of their money. And then the last M, so we've got medication, money, and the last M is memory. Does your loved one, do they tell the same story over and over again? They told you last night about something happening, and then the next morning they tell it to you like it's brand new and they never said it before. Or you say, "Did you have breakfast?" And they said, "No, I haven't eaten and since last night." And you see the breakfast plate on the table.
Mhm.
So if you notice problems with those three M's, the medication, the money, the memory, it might be a good idea to start talking with their primary care physician, maybe set up a cognitive testing, some psychological assessment for, they may just have some mild cognitive impairment, but we have to be mindful that those mild cognitive impairments is what leads progressively to dementia. Okay. So those are just some practical examples of what the aging problems look like. I think with our young adults, millennials, Gen Z, preschoolers, if I have four grandchildren. The oldest is 11, the youngest is 4. So sometimes just talking to their parents about, okay, here's what's happening at school. We yesterday in Wake County, with everything that was going on with the news, my kindergartner, quite a few of her friends were not in school yesterday. Her Spanish speaking friends were not there. So to explain to her why they weren't there, this is all, and so mom and dad have to say, okay, how much do we tell? How much do we explain? So, and then also the young adult who just graduated from college, the job market is not very good right now. So how do you keep your 23-year-old who went off to college, got this degree, and now is severely depressed, doesn't want to come out of their bedroom because they're back at home, they're back, they can't afford their own apartment, they can't afford to go and do what they did. So you're supporting that young adult as well. So in everyday terms, it just feels like as a sandwich caregiver, everybody's always needing something from you, and you are the anchor. And sometimes that anchor gets so heavy, and if you're not careful, it'll have a huge toll on you and your overall well-being.
Yeah, and I would assume that so much of this is mental load on your part.
Mental and also, financial as well.
Mhm.
Think about affordability. If you are your grandchildren need to go to childcare. But child, thinking again, having young grandchildren, I remember my daughter saying the childcare bill was almost as much as the mortgage,
Hmm.
paying for college and needing the money there, and then aging. So let's say you don't want mom or dad to move in with you. Have you looked into the cost of assisted living facilities or skilled nursing facilities? They can't afford it. Mom and dad are on a fixed income. So what do you do? So it's all three. It's the physical implications because you find yourself having difficulty sleeping, your appetite, you've gained some weight, even though you're not overeating, you've lost weight. And so you've got these physical changes, you've got the financial stressors of how do we, if I'm the anchor, how can I support my loved one by paying for paying for childcare and elder care
Hmm.
expenses. Okay. And then emotionally, just the fatigue of just feeling like everybody's dependent on me. Everybody's, calling my name and they need my help.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mhm.
So we touched on this, but I want us to go a little bit deeper into some of the cultural
Yes,
expectations or trappings, for lack of a better word, that might make this more complicated, or some of the community or institutional factors that might complicate this.
absolutely. I work a lot with African American families, immigrant families, across the spectrum. But when I think about African American families in particular, I think about our strong faith tradition. Okay, the church. If you do, you look at any survey, it'll tell you 99% of African Americans, Black families believe, whether they go to church or not, believe in a higher power. They believe in God. And whether they call God Jesus, Allah, Buddha, Mother Earth, they believe in a higher power. But the problem comes with the stigma associated with needing help.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. This sort of pray it away, take it to the altar, which is all great. I'm a person of faith myself. So when a client says to me, I pray and I lean in on my faith, I'm like, that's great. That half my job is done. If you've got that, I can give you some more tools, but if you start there, you're going to be okay. But what happens often, Amy, I find it, particularly in the Black community, is we will take something to the altar for prayer and we'll ask the congregation to pray over it. We'll ask the pastor to pray over it. And then as the masses or the service is ending, we pick it up and we take it with us.
Right.
Okay. So typically, I'm telling my clients, especially those with the SBW syndrome, which is, I call it the strong Black women syndrome. You've got the S on your chest and the cape on your back. I say to them that you can be strong in your faith, you can love God and still get depressed. You can be work hard in the church and still have anxiety, and it's not sometimes the guilt and shame that comes from needing help. Am I not praying enough? Am I not studying the word enough? And so trying to dispel the myths about um, having a mental health crisis means lack of faith. That we just want to dispel that. And again, taking away the stigma. I like to tell folks that if you have diabetes or hypertension, usually you don't say, oh, I'm just such a horrible person for having this. So I try to explain to people, psychoeducation, just hey, this is what's happening when you're depressed. I was explaining to a gentleman a couple days ago. He's retired, and I said to him that seasonal affective disorder, your circadian rhythm and your sleep and not getting the sunlight can exacerbate your depression. It's like, oh, okay, that makes sense. People feel better when you tell them it's not a sign of weakness or lack of
Hmm.
faith when you're having a mental health disorder, mental health crisis, and just feeling overwhelmed, feeling scared, feeling nervous. There's a lot, again, going on. People who rely on, last week, the food assistance, and you weren't able to get food assistance. That and you're stressed and you're worried about it. That's a natural response. You're not weak because you're feeling that way.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And I know as a woman of faith myself, there can be an added pressure for women to not only handle both sides of the sandwich, but also make it look effortless
Yes.
and put on a happy face through no matter what the circumstances are demanding.
Absolutely, absolutely. In fact, there's almost, again, it's an embarrassment, or people feel the stigma of how could I be a person of faith and have this sadness or have this anxiety? And I just, I try to encourage and let them know that it's not a sign of a lack of faith, or being grateful. When I tell a client that I know you're grateful for your job, I know you're grateful for not having to, that your utilities are on, or you have a car and you feeling sad does not mean you're not grateful for these blessings that you have. And so whoever came up, Amy, with this "too blessed to be stressed" phrase, I'm like, no way, you can be blessed and stressed at the same time.
Mhm.
So I
Absolutely.
think yeah, I think if we could do, just again, for those out in the webinar audience that sometimes feel guilty for even being in the sandwich generation. People say I shouldn't feel bad about having to care for my parent. My parent cared for me. Yeah, we know that, but you still feel overwhelmed. And I said to an 85-year-old about a month or so ago, when her husband passed away, and she was kind of, I don't want to, I guess I'm going to use the word relieved, but she felt so guilty and so like depressed about it, because she says, does this mean I didn't love him? And I'm like, no, you did not want him to suffer anymore. The more she talked about who he was before the Alzheimer's, and she says, I just know that, he loved, he was a teacher, he was this and that. And so in the end, it got painful. So when he passed away, she had a peace about it, but then
Mhm.
she felt guilty about it. So those are all this is why this emotional thing is tough, and we
Yeah.
have to keep letting folks know to not ignore it. It's real.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So on that note, we don't want to just identify the problem, right? We want to come up with solutions.
Absolutely.
So in your work with people of the sandwich generation, what tools, strategies, suggestions have you come up with to help sandwich generation caregivers kind of care for themselves and their own mental health?
Yes. So the word that I use often in therapy with my clients is intentionality, or being intentional. I usually tell them that you can't take a laissez-faire approach to your mental health.
Mhm.
And that comes from my training as a cognitive behavioral psychologist. But, sometimes when it comes to our mood and our emotions, people think I should just naturally, be happy, or why should I have to work at it? And I use the analogy that your primary care physician might use. If you went in and primary care says, hey, Amy, your blood pressure is elevated. I would like for you to lower your salt intake. I would like for you to stay hydrated, drink more water. I'd like for you to walk at least 10 or 15 minutes a day to get your exercise. Those are all practical, intentional applications to improve your hypertension. So that's how I kind of view my work in psychology. I call it for example, the 4 A's of anxiety management. So someone says, I'm super anxious, I worry all the time, I don't know what to do, I'm just consumed by this worry. So I call it the 4 A's. The first thing I tell clients is you have to be aware of what's going on in your head. So check
Mhm.
in with yourself. What are you thinking? What are you feeling? The second A is acknowledge. Can you tell someone, hey, I'm feeling a little overwhelmed, I'm feeling stressed, I'm really having a lot of grief right now. I'm thinking it's the holidays, and oh my gosh, Thanksgiving, Christmas, there's an exacerbation of grief for a lot of people who realize that they'll say, Mom used to make the turkey and she's not here anymore. And the
Hmm.
tears will flow, and I explained to them that even if it was 5 years ago, 10 years ago, holidays, anniversaries, birthdays all can reignite that grief. Okay. So acknowledge, don't try to hide it, internally, and just tell somebody, I'm feeling kind of sad, I'm feeling down. And if you can't acknowledge it to another person, if you are a person of faith, acknowledge to God and say, hey, God, I'm feeling sad today. I'm still a believer. I still study the word. I still pray, but I'm feeling kind of sad. Acknowledge. The next A is the hardest, and that's acceptance. Somehow we've come to believe acceptance means approval or agreement, and I'm like, nope, acceptance just means it is what it is.
Hmm.
It doesn't mean you have to agree with it or approve it. You just say, well, this is how I'm feeling. And then the last A is the action. What do I do? How do I respond to it? I tell my clients often, you cannot help the way you feel. Nobody should tell you you shouldn't feel that way. You ought not feel that way. You're too blessed to be stressed type of stuff. You
Hmm.
cannot help the way you feel. It's like a volcano inside of you that just bubbles up, okay? You can't help the way you feel, but you can help the way you respond to the feeling. Okay. So that's what that last A is about. What am I going to do about this feeling? So, some practical examples for sandwich generation caregivers. First thing is give yourself permission to not be perfect. You're going to drop the ball. You're going to forget about an appointment. Mom was supposed to go to her hearing aid doctor, and I got so busy at work because this team meeting had to happen. This project needed to get done, and I forgot about the hearing aid appointment. Okay, call up and reschedule. Don't get in the crock pot I always say, don't get in the crock pot with the misery. You get in that crock pot and you will just marinate in misery. Oh, I'm such a horrible person. How could I forget? How could I have forgotten this? Don't try to be perfect. I have a saying that I tell clients often: perfectionism makes good enough look bad.
Hmm.
Okay. And that goes with children, with your school age children. Don't be that parent or caregiver, sandwich generation caregiver who has a kid with five A's and one B, and you only focus on that B. That's not that you're setting them up for the perfectionism. So understand the myth of doing it all. And
Hmm.
multitasking is overrated. I know 20 years ago it was a big thing for women in the workplace. They had this Virginia Slims commercial, which, by the way, was advertising cigarettes, but it was about women being able to do it all. We could go to the office, we could cook the food, clean the house, we could do it all. Well, guess what? The research has shown it was a big myth. We
Hmm.
can't do it all. You will do better if you're mindful and focus on one thing at a time to the best of your ability. The next thing I think sandwich generation caregivers need to work on is delegation.
Hmm.
Can you delegate something to someone? I talk to folks who are caregiving for a loved one, and I'm like, can you get somebody to come in and help just for 2 hours? Maybe you can't afford, somebody to come for 8, 10 hours, but 2 hours in the morning to help mom get up and get dressed, or 2 hours in the evening to help dad get ready for bed and get in the bed. you know can you delegate? If you have siblings, often I will see the person in therapy that says, Dr. Moore, I have to do it all. My siblings, they don't help out. And quite often I will say to them, Amy, well, have you asked?
Hmm.
Have you made a request? you know in the caregiving for my mother-in-law, I'm very fortunate. We have a brother-in-law and sister-in-law in Fuquay, and we say, hey, we're going up to the mountains this weekend. Can you guys help out? If I didn't ask, they may not volunteer, but you have to ask, and then they're glad to help out.
Mhm.
If you plan, we like to travel, my husband and I, so we know where we're going in February. So I will send out a notice to the siblings, to in Texas and Florida and North Carolina, say, hey, can you guys come for the week? Ask for help. Don't just feel like you have, let them tell you no. Because often I will say, have you asked? No, but I know they just won't do it. I said, well, you can't say that if you did not ask. If they tell you no, that's a different story. But if you haven't asked, then you have to take ownership of that. Okay.
Mhm.
Um, Also, think about boundaries. Learn how to say no without a 10-minute explanation.
Mhm.
If you say, I don't have the capacity, I don't have the capacity. I just can't do it. I've got too much on my plate. And say that and then leave it alone. You can't do the 10-minute explanation. As a caregiver, sandwich generation caregiver, it is so important that you are intentional about your self care. Okay. Self care is not selfish. For my self care, I like getting up early. I'm an early riser. I mean, I just wake up at 5:30 in the morning, 6 o'clock, but that is the quiet time. That is my time. I do my devotion. I listen to a podcast. I might have my breakfast, all of this before I log on to start seeing clients at 8 o'clock in the morning. But that is my time so that I'm well. So think about, for you caregivers out there, do you have a morning ritual? Do you read a devotional? Can you make a cup of tea? Can you practice some breathing? Can you listen to some music? This is only for you to nurture yourself, setting one small goal a day. Don't think about cleaning up the whole house and the closets and decorating and all of this stuff. Just say, I'm going to try to take a 10-minute walk, or I'm going to try to drink 64 ounces of water. I'm going to try to hydrate. Make one small goal a day. Another thing about caregiving, Sam, do not neglect your own appointments. I talk to clients who are caregivers in the sandwich generation, and they say, oh, I missed my mammogram. Oh, I didn't go for my dental appointment because I had to get my grandkids over here and I had to pick up my father's medication and I just missed my appointment. So don't miss your appointments. Sleep. I sort of have a little rule with my clients about 48-hour rule with sleep. If you're having trouble falling asleep, staying asleep, if you go 48 hours, everything's going to be worse. 48 hours without good sleep. Your knee is going to hurt worse. Your headache is going to be worse. Your stress is going to be greater. Sleep and nutrition is pertinent. So those are just a few examples. The intentionality, I say, practice intentional joy. Figure out, what is it that brings you joy? It's different. Some people like Disney World and fireworks. Other people like sitting on the porch with a quiet, watching the birds, drinking a cup of tea. Figure out what it is for you and reclaim it. Reclaim joy, reclaim peace of mind, and tell yourself, I am going to do this for me. Those are just, I've got a
Mhm.
ton, I've got a ton of other recommendations, everything from gratitude, journaling, all of those things there's so many things. There's a great book called Natural Prozac that I usually recommend. These are things in our environment, things that help to boost serotonin and make you feel better.
Yeah, these are excellent. And do you, I'll mention one that I think we could expound on a little bit more is finding other sources of support.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for bringing that up. NAMI, again, to those of you in the audience, NAMI is probably one of the greatest sources of support in terms of support groups, peer support. When you go to a NAMI meeting, and we just had our state conference in Greensboro, and I was telling Amy earlier how great it was for me as a board member just to talk to family members and folks who have lived experiences about mental health. But when you go to one of these support groups, and lo and behold, you find out that you're not alone, that there's other people out there who feel the same way. I'm in a sorority here, and we were at a function, just a social event, and we're sitting at a table of 8, and we had to talk to each other. Come to find out of the 8 people sitting at the table, 5 of us had significant caregiving roles, caring for someone. And that was like, wow, I didn't know you were caring for your sister. Wow, I didn't know you were caring for your dad and you're caring for your mom. So that in and of itself helps you to feel better. So seek
Mhm.
out support, respite care. If your loved one has any sort of, Medicare, Medicaid, see what's available in terms of help. Your churches, lean into your faith communities for support groups, and of course, counseling and therapy. Um, there are more, there are many folks, I don't want to say many like me, there are quite a few therapists, psychologists, social workers, counselors. Get that insurance card that you have, flip it over, call that number on the back of your card, and ask about mental health providers. Put mental health providers on your list. Just go talk to someone. We don't have magic wands that make everything go away, but a good hour of saying, this is what's bothering me, this is what I need help with, can be very helpful in your overall well-being.
Mhm.
And employee assistance programs, sometimes check with your company if you're still working. Look for your employee assistance programs as well.
Yeah. Yeah,
Mhm.
absolutely. I put a link in the chat to our calendar on our website. You can go there and you can search for support groups that are near you. Of course, that's just a link for the NAMI support groups, but we do offer in-person and virtual options around the state. So we encourage people to take a look at that
Mhm.
as well.
Yes.
We've got a couple of questions from the
Okay.
audience, if you don't mind.
Yep.
So, and feel free for the next few minutes if you have additional questions on this topic. Please feel free to add those. We'll be happy to take them. But one is, as a Medicare provider, do you experience challenges billing and being reimbursed for mental health and peer support?
Absolutely.
Mhm.
Did you just read my mind? I was talking to Amy about it earlier. Um, there was no, honestly, like I said, I've been a Medicare provider since 2011. But when the pandemic happened in 2020, that was the beginning of as a provider, every 5 years, you have to renew your contract. No problem, nothing, I love talking to older adults. I always say my grandmother had sisters, and I was that kid sitting on the porch listening to these conversations. It's probably why I'm a psychologist today, but I really enjoy it. But what happened was during the pandemic, we had to move out of our office. I've had 2 office assistants. Well, lo and behold, Medicare was sending my renewal reminders to the old address. I never got it. So even after, 15 years of being a provider, they said, oh, sorry, Dr. Moore, you got to start all over again. So it is, I'm working it out. We're working it out. And come January, we'll have it all fixed out. But there aren't a lot of, it's hard to find providers that will accept Medicare, Medicaid. And it's not because we don't want to serve, but I think they just make it so challenging for
Mhm.
providers to get reimbursed. But it can be done. And there is something about seeing folks over 65 that I just really love. This particular area I'm in Cary, we have the highest percentage of well seniors in the state of North Carolina. So this zip code actually, and these are folks that are typically well, but they're dealing with the loss of a spouse, their memory challenges. My knee is not working like it used to, and my adult children don't call me anymore. And so I really love seeing them. So it is a challenge to
Hmm.
once you're in, then it's okay.
Yeah. We were talking about NAMI programs earlier, and this person asks, NAMI classes often talk about dealing with the guilt we may feel when caring for a loved one with a mental health condition.
Yes.
What are some ways we can deal with the guilt we feel when we have to say no, or when we may get angry about the disruptions that caregiving can give to our lives?
Oh my gosh, that's an excellent question. And it's so layered, I don't want to give you just a straight answer because it's so layered. And at the NAMI convention conference in Greensboro, sitting in workshops, listening to parents, caregivers. My son has schizophrenia, bipolar. He won't take his medications. He's fine when he takes his medications, but when he doesn't take them, it is horrible. So we talked about strategies, asking open-ended questions rather than immediately giving instructions and telling them what to do. In terms of your own personal guilt feelings, understand that it's probably part of the caring role. The you can have I tell clients all the times, you can have 2, 3 different emotions at the same time. When I think about complicated grief, people who lost a loved one that they had unresolved issues, maybe you lost somebody you love, but at the time of their death, things were unsettled.
Hmm.
So you can grieve their death but also be angry with them for
Hmm.
not resolving that conflict. So I think as this to answer that question, understanding that you can love your person, you can care for your person, but you can also be angry and frustrated with your person. So the guilt that you feel is a byproduct of those mixed emotions, cognitive dissonance, that feeling of this is how I should feel, and this is how I actually feel. That's
Hmm.
where the distress lies. That's where all of the emotional uneasiness lies. It's in that space between here's what I think it should be, but here's what it is. So guilt lies right in there. So I don't know if that was helpful, but I think just understanding it, and again, some of the other tools, the breathing, the prayer, the self care is important.
Yeah. We had one question that asked about you talking about meeting other people at the table. Um, did that kind of turn into a bit of a support group? And do you have contact with those same people that you had the conversations with?
Yes, we are in a sorority together, and in fact, every time we see each other, we check on each other. Monthly. We when we're together, and we people identify with. We look at each other like, um, how are things going? How are things, how are you doing? Can we meet for coffee? Can we, I say, I'm off on Fridays. Do you want to grab lunch? And we can just talk about ways that we can support each other. I think, one of what makes your distress worse is when you think it is just you and it's just you suffering. But when you find out that so many other people are dealing, especially with caring for aging parents, that it's helpful to realize you're not alone. You're not on that island by yourself.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. We had an interesting comment here from, I think, one of yours.
Oh.
I think I speak for all adult children when I say we still need the real adults. And I think that that speaks to, what you were talking about kind of still needing to guide our adult children and still needing to kind of help them figure out the next steps in life and how that parenting role changes as your children become adults.
Absolutely. But you know what I say all the time, and my young adults, I talk to each one of them and they might tap into me, but I tap into them. I
Hmm.
said the other day, I'm on a prayer call on Tuesday mornings, and I was telling the group, I was like, my oldest is my daughter. She's 36, and I'm like, gosh, how did she get to be so smart and so awesome? And I get just as much from her as I might help her out with the kids, or hey, I cooked dinner for you, come over and get it, or I've got Halloween costumes for the kids, come over and get it. But then when I talk to her, she grounds me as well. And then for
Hmm.
me, my parents are flying here. They're in their 80s, and they will be here on Monday. And I'm so grateful because my mom's traveling from New Orleans, and we Thanksgiving, I'm just going to be her sous chef. I'm going
Hmm.
to clean up and chop whatever she tells me to chop. So, um, being grateful, being present, that is just so invaluable. If you often, I tell clients, when you're feeling distressed, I can almost guarantee that you are thinking about something that happened in the past, last week, last month, last year. Why did I do that? I should have done this. I wish mom had saved more. I wish they'd written out a plan of what we're supposed to do. What? That's the distress. Or it's something that might happen. How fast will this disease progress?
Hmm.
When will she not know her name? Will she? So if you come to the present moment and practice it in a intentional way, and just be present, that's where you're going to find the peace. Peace is in the present moment.
Hmm.
We call it mindfulness in therapy, but in spiritual and religious, it goes back to that scripture, be still and know that I am God. A lot of people, Amy, you said you're a believer. You probably had people come to you and say, Amy, I'm asking God to give me a sign on what direction I should go. And as they start telling you your story, you're thinking, there goes sign one. Oops, that's sign two. But they're expecting the volcano to erupt, they're expecting the tsunami to come on shore, but it's a whisper and it's a quiet being in that present moment that you will get answers. So try your best to be present, especially during these holidays. If you feel grief, which again, we're going to remember our loved ones who are not here, but rather than getting in the crock pot with the misery, figure out how you can honor them. Maybe get one of those battery operated candles and sit it on the table and say, this is the light that mom, she's not here with us physically anymore, but we're going to light this candle so we can honor her, or we're going to pull out some pictures and we're going to share with each other. So sit with acknowledge the grief, but don't get in the crock pot with it. Be intentional about finding joy and reclaiming your peace.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
Well, Dr. Moore, I think we could ruminate on this topic for another hour, but I am going to close it up here. And thank you so much for your incredible insights, your stories, and just for being a spokesperson and an advocate for people in this generation who so often feel undersung and unseen. We really appreciate this topic and the fact that you brought this to us, especially timely now that, a lot of people in that sandwich generation are planning their Thanksgiving menus and cleaning up for guests and needed to hear this word today. So we really appreciate that.
You're
Um,
welcome, Amy. I do want to just say the last thing is you cannot pour from an empty cup.
Absolutely.
So, and if you take, your mental health is not optional. It's essential that if you're going to be a caregiver, you have to care for yourself. Self-care is not selfish.
Hmm. Absolutely.
Thank you.
And just in case we had anybody who is interested in watching this again or anybody who missed out, we will have the recording on our YouTube channel by Monday of next week, and I will send that out to everybody who registered, along with any additional resources or contact information or whatever Dr. Moore wants to provide to us. We'll have all that to you. So we encourage you to keep an eye out for that. And also, we'll encourage you to keep an eye out for our next NAMI at noon. Still working on securing our December schedule, but we have a couple of really insightful programs set up for January already. One dealing with the effects of traumatic brain injury, and another with human trafficking. So a little bit of a heavy topic, but we're going to present that for you all after the first of the year. Um, any final words today, Dr. Moore?
I just want you all to get a pen and a sticky note and put self-care is not selfish. If I'm going to do what I'm being called to do, and
Mm,
the load is heavy, um, you know, but you can't do it if you're broke down. So you have
mhm.
to be intentional about your self-care.
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. So if you'd like more from uh, from us, if you want to know about some more of these events, opportunities, more webinars, or self-care tips, please follow us on our social media, and we can make sure that you have all of that information about other things that we have upcoming.
And Amy, I
Um,
do want to say, if you want to reach out to me, I'm not soliciting any, I have an overflow of clients, but Psychology Today, I have a profile there, and also on my website, which I'll make sure we include that
mhm.
but if you just go to Psychology Today and put in Dr. Tammie Moore, you can find me there, and you can send me a message from that website as well.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Well, as we come up on the Thanksgiving holiday, we're just grateful for all of you for joining us. We hope you all have a wonderful and safe holiday. And thank you again, Dr. Moore, and thank you all for joining us. Have a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you for joining.